Vikings came. They settled here. The market town of Woodbridge might seem an unlikely place to find the origins of English kingship. And yet there they lie, just across the River Deben. Now hidden by a 19th century plantation of fir trees, stands a windswept promontory some 200 feet high. And behind the trees, on the acid heathland, are 16 uninspiring grassy mounds built on the sandy outcrop, the site of Sutton Hoo. In the summer of 1939, the landowner of Sutton Hoo employed 3 local men to begin digging into the largest mound. Their leader was a self-taught archaeologist of remarkable ability, Basil Brown. He was to become the unsung hero of one of the most spectacular episodes in British archaeology. His work was to be continued by professional excavators once its significance became apparent, but it was through his locally acquired skill and perceptiveness, as this unique 8mm film shows, that the Sutton Hoo ship burial came to light. What he had discovered in the sand was the ghost outline, deceptively real, of a ship that had decayed centuries before, leaving only a shadow of compacted and discolored sand. As this shadow became stronger, first thoughts had been of a Viking ship burial, of a type already found in Scandinavia, but they were soon to uncover evidence of a date of more than a century before the Vikings, around 630 AD, a Saxon burial. What emerged by skillful excavation was the complete outline of a vast open rowing boat, a vessel which had certainly been used for a working lifetime and then manually hauled uphill and buried well below the original surface and beneath the mound itself to deter robbers. There had been no parallel to the discovery of this unique ship, nearly 90 feet in length, anywhere in Europe. But it was not the ship itself which was to cause the public sensation. It was the discovery in its midst of a burial chamber and the Sutton Hoo treasure. The international symbols of wealth and power, designed in the 7th century to do what they still do today, to impress. This is the very beginning of English kingship, the first royal regalia. But for whom was this scepter designed? And what nature of society was it meant to impress? Are these the symbols of the last pagan king, or the first to turn towards Christianity? No body was ever found in this most lavish of burials. So what manner of king lay behind such an elaborate facade? A king with wealth, power, and security. A court and an elaborate social order. But where? To find the answers, a national body of scholars decided in 1983 to mount a full investigation of the whole site under the direction of archaeologist Martin Carver.
Sutton Hoo is one of the great names of this century. It's one of the greatest discoveries. The attraction for archaeologists is that a collection of material like that in the Mound 1 ship burial is not only striking for its beauty, but it's also striking in that it contains an enormous amount of information about an individual and the society to which that individual belonged. I think we are mainly interested in human behavior. This isn't an apology. I think most people are interested in human behavior, and if you are interested in it, if you care what happened to the human race, then you are interested in archaeology. These things are connected. So that Sutton Hoo must have that potential for it to be worthwhile to us.
Sutton Hoo is a site that has never given up its secrets easily. In 1965, Rupert Bruce Mitford, the great interpreter of the ship burial, returned to the scene to study what was left of the ship and the barrow, and to look underneath them. The ship still lay where it had been left on the outbreak of war in 1939. Not so much a ship as the impression of a ship. To record such a thing, let alone preserve it, called for something special. Plaster of Paris was laid in blocks, and each block carefully removed, carrying with it the imprint of a sector of the hull with its rivets and ribs. Its rusty accretions and stained sand, shapes, colours, textures. These are the real signals from the Dark Ages at Sutton Hoo. The British Museum team confronted them as the 1939 excavators had before them. Now I, in turn, must learn to read these signals, discover new ones, and then take the study wider. My objective is not just a context for this ship, but for the community which built it. We want to get a sight of the formative years of England, to define a whole kingdom, and it's only archaeology which can help us.
Unfortunately, the archaeology is extremely difficult. We lack houses, we lack structures, and generally we lack finds. A site like Sutton Hoo, which appears to concentrate artifacts and also to concentrate the traces left by human behavior, is therefore going to be of extreme potential and extreme importance.
Such a site, such a precious resource, must be wooed, not raped. Because even the turf of this great area, it's about the size of a cricket field, contains clues about what happened here. An archaeological project, like any other, requires a plan of campaign and begins with reconnaissance. Long before we enter any of the barrows, we must reconnoitre them and map them carefully.
Well, the first part of our exploration is simply an inspection of the surface of the mounds. Very important that we should be able to distinguish between parts of the ancient mound itself and damage done in later centuries. Here, for example, we can see parts of rabbit holes, mole holes, and here you can see two grooves coming round, one there and one there, and these were probably caused by tanks. The site was used during the war as a tank training area, the mounds providing rather convenient hull-down positions in an otherwise flat landscape, and of course the tanks left their tracks across the mounds, and the mounds sustained a bit of damage as a result. Perhaps not obviously serious, but when one is excavating an area like this to try and discover everything that happened, then these will be significant.
No one even knows how big the site at Sutton Hoo really is. So in the adjacent fields, we search for signs at its edges. Every object picked up by the plough is exactly plotted. Over 4,000 such objects show a pattern, fading away as the edges are approached. Field walking requires skill and great patience. In 4 months, these two have walked over 75 miles. But every science has aspects that seem tedious. Zoologists measure animals, botanists count plants. We collect chipped, scorched stones, wash them, weigh them, label them, and map them, because they are the trail left by people who used this site a long time ago. A very long time ago, as virtually all the finds from the fields turn out to be prehistoric. On the turf of the newly mown barrow site, clues are given by different colours, different species of plant, which show where the ground has been disturbed by earlier diggers, not always in the interests of science. We're making a map of buried holes.
Okay.
Meter 146, broadleaf grass, 4 reading.
Right. Everything found, everything we're going to find, has to be located to the nearest millimetre. You need perfectionists for this kind of work. We're not doing this for ourselves, we're doing it for students of Sutton who aren't yet born. And we make the assumption that the facts matter more than our opinions. Right. Laying out a grid, laying the contours of the surface onto the grid, provides the bare canvas on which later digging will slowly paint in the details. One of the great advantages of archaeology in the 1980s, the electronic archive. At Birmingham University, where the Sutton Hoo Field Unit has its base, the first stack of data is entered on computer file. These are the readings taken in the field to reconstruct the surface contours. X, Y, Z coordinates for each point. There are 11,000 of them. The tantalising surface of the turf. We've mown it, drawn it, and mapped it. Now, can we see through it? Metal detectors have got themselves a bad name through the activities of a few treasure hunters, and of course Sutton Hoo is no stranger to them. In practice, the things which give the bleeps here are mainly bullets, bombs and grenades left over from Sutton Hoo's army days, plus of course the nails and bottle tops of earlier archaeologists. By showing where the metal is, the metal detector finds a patch for more sensitive instruments, such as magnetometers. These are easily distracted by metal. What they're looking for are filled-in holes, holes which once contained wooden posts or the body of an Anglo-Saxon. This magnetometer is exceptionally sensitive, but is still definitely on trial on these 25 acres of inscrutable sand. The results that come out aren't yet easy to interpret, at least not in isolation. You get a map of the magnetic noise made by post holes, ditches, and natural iron too. The trouble is, you can't always tell which is which. We need more precision than these two-dimensional maps can give. We need to see in 3 dimensions.
Archaeologists at the moment are under an enormous pressure to record sites which are about to be destroyed through the exigencies of modern development. Practically all our energy goes into this. It does mean, however, that there is a danger of the discipline failing to develop technically above all, failing to take advantage of new scientific methods. We are essentially a forensic discipline, one that is trying to detect human behavior from traces, and therefore we need scientific aids of all descriptions. If people are prepared to sponsor a research excavation, a project for the sake of research, and at the same time to develop new techniques, then that must be good for British archaeology.
Soil sounding radar is new and might give us the 3rd dimension. we've recruited its inventor, Mike Gorman of Cambridge University.
And it started up and moved a short distance and taken its next reading.
How far is that?
That's 10 centimetres.
10 centimetres for each reading.
Yeah, and in fact the step sizes are pretty accurately controlled because there's a very high gear ratio on the motors. They're quite accurate over a range of slopes. Small slopes, that is to say, anyway.
But you're going to need us to set out 10 centimetre parallel tram lines for it to run down.
I don't actually think it's going to be necessary to do 10 centimetre parallel tracks. I think probably we'll find that a metre will be sufficient. Yeah.
Oh, that's easy.
The antennas have a very wide beam, so they're covering perhaps a metre wide near the surface, but by the time they're down 2 or 3 metres, then perhaps they're looking at 2 or 3 metre width as well.
Yes. And then this is going to be computed together once we've got all the data.
That's right. Once you'll wind up with a three-dimensional network of points, which represent 2 dimensions will be distance along and across on the ground, and the third dimension will be the depth, as measured by the radar. The radar sends out across a very short pulse and gets back an echo from any change in material. So if you've got a hole which has been dug into the soil and that's been filled in with a different material, then as the radar wave propagates to the soil, you'll get a reflection from that change, and this will be measured.
In more ways than one, Mike's machine is taking archaeology in a new direction.
Well, basically, I'm a physical scientist turned archaeologist. I've been working at the Scott Polar Research Institute because at the Institute we've been developing techniques for looking through ice in polar regions, and I've been trying to extend these same techniques into looking through soils for archaeology. And thinking about it a bit more, it seemed to me that in fact archaeology was really rather unique among disciplines in that it actually destroyed its fundamental source material as it went along. It's really rather extraordinary when one thinks about it. The analogy which I developed was that it was something like a medieval historian reading through an original medieval source document, reading it through once and then burning it. I mean, he got some information when he read it through, but obviously it's not there anymore and subsequent people can't check it out and so on. And that's the analogy which I rather like regarding excavation. So I was spurred to try to develop a range of techniques for recovering archaeological information without excavation. Now, the work at Sutton Hoo gives us a wonderful opportunity to test out these new techniques, mainly the radar and some of the other new ones, because it's a long-term research project. It's going to be going on for 5 years. There will be excavation afterwards for comparative purposes, although ultimately one hopes that the techniques will be well enough developed not to require excavation, or at the very least that they will be well enough developed so that one can excavate an absolute minimum amount of the site. It's tremendously exciting to be able to see things in the soil when the soil is apparently opaque, and I find it very, very satisfying.
So, just imagine what archaeology could be like one day. Buried features described, without digging, by a series of radiographic slices, harnessed together to give a three-dimensional image. Our immediate target at Sutton Hoo, for example, is to see if the radar can identify ship impressions, burial chambers, or robber pits inside the mounds. It's a technique that could have profound consequences for excavation strategy and heritage management, not to mention the manufacturers of trowels. But these are early days, just the beginnings of something rather difficult. Powerful hardware like this at Cambridge is needed to draw up just a single slice, a single sweep down through the ground, and even then, there's no guarantee we'll actually understand it.
Right, well, here's the first radar plot on Sutton Hoo. Yeah, we want a bit of explanation, I think. Basically, you've got the surface of the soil at the top of the record, and you're looking down into the soil as you go deeper. This is from mound 12 in the northwest corner of the site. You're running over a barrow here, and you can actually see the interface between the barrow and the old land surface here. It appears to drop away, of course, because these measurements...
Inverse reflection.
Yes, these measurements are relative to the surface, and so we'll have to put in a correction to...
Well, it's showing the shape, at least.
It's showing the shape, absolutely.
Nice
and
work, Mike.
you can also see the internal structure. There's quite a lot going on inside the barrow. You see, just where the barrow ends, these internal reflections stop. Also, just at the bottom, in the middle of the barrow, there's something here, just underneath the old land surface. And that's rather interesting, I think. One doesn't quite know what that might be, but it's obviously a fairly strong feature to be producing that reflection.
In the centre of the barrow.
In the centre of the barrow, absolutely.
Under Mound 12, a burial chamber sends some faint signals to Mike Gorman's radar. A very inviting prospect. So, what about some digging? Well, not there, not yet. We still don't know what kind of a site we're in, only that it's varied, or how big it was, only that it's vast, or how long it lasted, only that it was a long time. Every expedition needs some kind of a map, and we haven't yet got one. So, long trial trenches are cut into the broad expanse of ploughed fields which surround the barrows. Field walking told us that some activity here had left a scatter of flint and fragments of pottery. But for all we know, the traces of the settlement that produced them have been thoroughly erased by ploughing. We must see how much has survived and where. Less than 6 inches beneath the sugar beet, the dark brown pits begin to show. And we have a date, a complete Neolithic pot, somewhat the worse for wear after 5,000 years under the ground. The southern trench was cut through a strip of young potatoes. Archaeologists invariably work on other people's property, and courteous, supportive and interested farmers and landowners are a real blessing. Their prehistoric predecessors also farmed this dry, sandy soil and dug ditches, built fences. Much later, after the era of the great Anglo-Saxon cemetery, the medieval inhabitants built this metalled trackway. To some people, it must all seem rather a waste of time. Here we are, in the middle of a potato field, 110 metres from the nearest barrow, lovingly transcribing the pits of Bronze Age farmers. Why not get stuck into a mound, dig up another king? Well, archaeologists have learnt to be systematic the hard way. These days, we trust to method rather than luck. Sutton Hoo is like a big jigsaw, so we start at the edges. These exploratory trenches are cut into the fields simply to see something of what is there. They're not archaeological excavations as such. What they are pencils of light shining in the darkness. And here we pick up a Bronze Age settlement. A bit further on, a medieval trackway. These prehistoric settlements declare themselves by post holes, ditches, palisade trenches, and so on. So we know they're settlements, not, for example, burial sites. Medieval trackway is a ribbon of stones, just little tiny pieces of gravel packed into the ground and covered with silt, and in the silt, the ruts. Now, we can't say from this exercise the exact shape of the prehistoric settlements. We can't say where the medieval road is going. All we can say is that they're there. In one of these trenches, under the sugar beet, we had our first encounter with an Anglo-Saxon.
Put the board on there and just go, I think, in the bottom of the grave.
The cutting crossed part of an oblong pit, which contained a dark strip looking like a root. It was the shadow of a leg. We needed the whole individual, and we wanted to see if we could resurrect his whole shape in 3 dimensions, using these stains in the sand. A small extension was made so that the outline of the whole grave could be seen. To start with, it looked too short for the owner of the leg, But excavation gave the answer. He was sitting up, or rather hunched up, like someone in a bath. The body had very largely decayed, turned to a brown, crusty sand, and there were traces of a wooden coffin. This grave, aligned northeast to southwest, seems to belong to a style that is found to be Anglo-Saxon in Suffolk. The exact date isn't yet known, but the traces of 3 similar burials were found near the barrows in the 1960s. This body is 70 metres away, but it seems very likely that we are in the same period and in the same cemetery. So the Anglo-Saxon burial ground, the same one that contained the ship burial, is roughly twice the size that we originally thought. Over 10 acres. These bodies are at their most revealing when first exposed. The shape and colours must be captured fast. The camera and Gillian Hutchinson are on loan from the National Maritime Museum. A pair of stereo photographs can be taken and drawn up to give a 3-dimensional plan far quicker than could possibly be done by hand. All the same, this is only a first attempt. There are things here we don't even yet know how to see. The reconnaissance in the fields is very encouraging, and the system, by and large, seems to be working. An Anglo-Saxon body, a Neolithic pot, many signs of settlement, most of it pretty ancient. Moreover, it looks as though we've just got here in time. The features are still quite readable, in spite of intense modern cultivation. This plough mark has just touched, but not removed, a Bronze Age hearth, a fire that went out about 3,000 years ago. Now, taking the results of our exploratory transects, we can already say something about the overall shape of our site. Firstly, there are no less than 4 prehistoric settlements within our area of interest. A Neolithic settlement, a Beaker settlement, a Bronze Age settlement, and an Iron Age settlement. But is it simply a coincidence that they are found beneath the Anglo-Saxon burial cemetery, burial site at Sutton Hoo? I'm beginning to think not. I think now that the site which the Anglo-Saxons chose as their prestige cemetery had already been occupied as a folk centre for some 3,000 years. So far, so good. But what about that wooded slope on the riverside? I wonder what the Saxons did with that. Immediately to the west of Mound 1, where the ship burial was found in 1939, now largely obscured by these trees, lies a small promontory, small flat promontory. Now, this promontory must have been exploited by our prehistoric peoples, and also it must have been used at the time that the Anglo-Saxon cemetery occupied the spot. What exactly could it have been used for? For example, we have lost a ship burial. One was discovered in 1860 and completely removed, the barrow completely removed. It could have stood on this promontory. We thought we would investigate what was there, and the object of the exercise was simply to strip a small area, 2 meters by 20, and see what kind of a strata we came up against. I reasoned that if there had been a barrow, then what we would find is a mass of disturbed sand and grey earth from the turves, just spread about. And then somewhere in the middle would be a trench where the ship had been buried. Now that trench could not escape us. It must still be there. But there are so many disturbances here with the roots of these conifers, rabbits, that it makes all types of archaeology extremely difficult. Not just difficult, but until the trees are cleared, fairly impossible. Sutton Hoo is always throwing down challenges. The next one was to see if we could work literally in the dark. Right, fine night, moon coming later. Wonderful, couldn't be better. No, we're going to do this as though we were always doing night shifts, which we haven't been doing before. It was actually some comments of the local farmers that suggested we should try working at night. They, like us, are always trying to get the upper hand in the battle with the elements. For us, it's moist sand which shows the colours, and the colours which show the features. And still, damp air was what we were promised at night. And of course, we would be able to control the light, the most important factor of all. In practice, the air was soft and humid, making digging quite possible. So we know we can do it. That is, if we have to. It's horribly tiring on the eyes and the ears. However, the occasion did produce a solution to quite a different problem, one that had worried me during the survey: how to record minute undulations in the surface. The solution? High intensity and directional lighting.
No, sorry, other way. Yeah.
That same surface we had measured with 11,000 contour readings could now be seen in very fine detail. With a little improvisation and the help of Jim Hooker from City University, we could record these effects by photogrammetry, 60 feet up in the air.
If you could bring the back leg straight. That's it.
Can you move it round so it's closer to the camera?
It's not on the camera. There. Right. Okay, a little bit more.
It only needs to be within a metre anyway, so...
Yeah, okay, then just put it a bit more towards the camera.
Right.
That's it. Hold it there for a minute.
Okay.
Next exposure. 16 seconds this time. Taking photographs from a swaying platform at night has its own problems, but the first results are promising. The plan will be made from stereo photographs, which carry traces of our own footprints and tyre marks, as well as the dark strip of an earlier buried feature over there to the right. In the small hours of the morning, another experiment with light, this time ultraviolet light. Police forces use ultraviolet light to search for the traces of buried bodies, and we're in the same type of business.
My way a little bit more.
Your way? What, here?
That'd be fine.
Our victim was the Anglo-Saxon we'd already dug up, who had emerged as a sculpture in the sand. But it wasn't clear exactly what we'd been looking at: decayed bone, flesh, clothes, or the wood of a coffin. Local photographer Edward Morgan built his own cadmium chloride filter for the job. We hope that under the UV lamp, the bone will fluoresce. And it just about does. This looks like a good way of learning more about a body. Make it glow in the dark. What kind of people were these? One body doesn't describe a society any more than one person makes an opinion poll. We need, as they say, a sample, and a good-sized sample at that. That will come, but at this stage in the reconnaissance we just need a few graves to indicate how people were buried, how well their remains have survived, how easily we can find them and describe them. Peter Leach, the senior supervisor at Sutton Hoo, and a very skilled excavator, has tackled this kind of problem before, as of course have many other archaeologists working on sand. There's no substitute here for good eyesight, a steady hand, and an open mind. This is not something a machine can do, or perhaps I should say, not yet.
With the excavation of a deep feature, obviously one of the primary objectives is to try and follow layers, in other words, changes of colour, changes of texture. In dealing with burials, which are on this particular site rather peculiar in their preservation, and consequently the excavation, the techniques of excavation necessary to get at them are perhaps rather special. In a sense, the skeletons survive as layers of soil, and therefore one has to follow the contours of those layers. The difficulties, of course, involved in that are that we are dealing with a three-dimensional object of rather intricate outline and uncertain preservation. And to follow that, it's a very fine process to remove the sand from another kind of sand. We're dealing really with two sorts of sand really here. A humic sand, almost a peaty material, which is how the skeletons first appear, and of course the surrounding matrix in which they're buried, the backfill of the grave, which of course is a mixed, loose, much looser sand. Superficially that may appear to be a fairly obvious difference, but in practice it is a very tricky job actually getting the horizon of separation, if you like, between those two.
So every grave is a wholly new start and a different kind of failure. At the present state of the art, our technique of consolidation is imperfect, and we have to coax out and record these human forms in a single day. Archaeology is about people. We look upon these bodies as fossilized human lives. Each one lived as a certain sex, to a certain age, to die at a certain date, as an example of his or her class and time. Vital statistics which we are learning to read, whether a man or woman, from the size of the pelvis, the age, if we're lucky, from the crowns of the teeth, the date of death by radiocarbon dating of such fragments as remain.
We can clearly not preserve the skeletons in the way that one would preserve bone by removing them, although of course they are removed, the traces, the sand and what bone survives certainly is removable, but not in a comprehensible shape or form. As you'll appreciate, sand, once dried out, is a very unstable material and will either blow off or in fact just goes to a beach-like consistency. It's very much like excavating on a beach, really, once the sun comes out and the wind dries everything up.
The main thing reminiscent of a beach is actually the tourists. Sutton Hoo attracts visitors, and very welcome they are. In the final analysis, the work is being done for the public at large. So, being looked at is part of the job.
Originally in here, you would have expected to find a body of an Anglo-Saxon, therefore you're dealing with bones and such like. This particular soil destroys all evidence of bone. You remember I said that it's the great unknown, was there ever a body, over in Mound 1, the great Sutton Hoo burial. Here then, we've got not bone, but the trace of bone. It discolours the sand, and what you're seeing there is coloured sand in such a way it's possible to excavate it. At this end, on this one, you've got the head. Notice incidentally this idea of everybody being buried facing the same way is clearly confounded. Here, it's the other way round. And here we've got the feet at this end, going back to the head. If you like to just come past, you'll have a look down and see it.
Every burial so far discovered at Sutton Hoo has been different. Barrows, cremations, simple graves with or without coffins, aligned north-south or east-west, each betraying a different custom, a different attitude to death and the supernatural. Put them all together and you begin to get a glimpse of a community. Some people still pagan, others newly Christian. Some affecting the ritual splendor of a ship burial, others through poverty, belief or circumstance, laid face down in an empty grave on the fringes of the cemetery.
How's it going? Nearly done. There he is. On his face. His hands behind his head.
One hand.
Well, one hand, yes, one hand.
Elbow out.
Yeah.
Stunning, stunning.
It's really good. Can't see the other arm.
Magnificent. So you've got at least 3 different sorts of brown.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that's all clear. You can see the pelvis.
Body stain. That line there,
Yeah.
behind
That,
sort of arse
yes,
level.
that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, is that the body stain?
Well,
What is that?
Could be.
Coffin? You don't think that's coffin?
No, it's not coffin. I'm sure there's no coffin. Certain of it.
So we've got the light brown body stain.
Yes.
And there.
It's there intermittently, I think. Yes.
But that's different from the head.
Oh yes,
The
that's
bone of the arm.
yes, that's
Bone
nice.
of the pelvis, bone of the
Dark,
leg,
peachy
knees,
looking stuff.
etc.
Yes. Yes.
Nice work.
Rather a larger grave than was needed, in fact.
The last stage of our reconnaissance, and the moment has come to enter a barrow. I chose Mound 2 because that was where Basil Brown had already cut a trench. It was one of the barrows he opened in 1938. I decided to reopen part of his trench and to let him be our guide. Well, he laid out a compass bearing, so it's just about right there, like that. So it should be shaped this club fashion. Now, as a matter of fact, I couldn't find the lead-in trench at all, and I presume it's covered in spoil there.
Yes.
But there are lots of candidates for the top side of the trench, a bit over the top of the barrow. But what we'll do is we'll try the tape, okay?
Okay.
On various measurements on here to see which fit best. And then we'll do a check
Fine.
from the ground surface. It wasn't quite as easy as it might seem. The plan sketched by Basil Brown didn't show clearly where his trench was on the ground. But I wanted to use the central part of this trench to get a preview of the inside of a mound without disturbing it further. The curious dinghy-like boat that he reported also needed re-inspection if it had survived from its excavation nearly 50 years ago. A slice across the presumed site of the trench is chosen, and the downward journey begins, initiated by two experts on early medieval boats. Gillian Hutchinson of the National Maritime Museum is joined by Angela Evans of the British Museum. Nearly half a century in Sutton Hoo's corrosive sand, and little can be seen of the edges of Basil Brown's trench, even beneath the turf. The surface is cleaned, drawn, photographed from above using a kite, then cleaned again.
Yep. Right.
The uneven edges at last appear, and the soil put back in 1938 can be identified and extracted. Basil Brown's trench collapsed at least twice, as his diary tells us. We are naturally anxious to avoid a similar fate.
And the next one. That's true, actually. Is that your finger, I see?
Yeah.
Oh, could you remove that? No. Take another turn, William. A bit less.
Slightly premature. The timber shoring is designed to descend with the excavation and to make sure the excavation doesn't descend on us. 10 days later, the top of the planks showed the profile reached far below. The sides of the 1938 trench are followed carefully down, giving us a preview of the barrow makeup as we thread our way along the edge of Basil Brown's cut, along the holes cut by grave robbers, around the displaced chunks of barrow which have slipped or slumped. And our every step is recorded, like the unwinding of a thread as you go down into an underground maze. At 12 feet down, below the level of the turf and the fields, the boat-shaped pit appears. And so does something else, rather unexpected. A curious curve, and at its lowest point, a slot. The curve is marked out by the junction of dark soil and bright yellow sand, and looks decidedly like the outline of a boat. Does this outline belong to the dinghy-like boat that Basil Brown excavated? It looks like nothing that he reported. The slot is almost like a keel. If it's really a keel, it is possible that robbers had cut through a bigger boat, a boat like the Mound 1 ship, and into the pit below. But only the excavation of the whole barrow will decide. So, Basil Brown has guided us well. His boat-shaped pit is exactly as he drew it, straight-sided and flat-bottomed. But his boat seems to be 18 inches underneath another one, and quite unlike any boat known to medieval history. Our investigations into this mound have followed the trail blazed by Basil Brown in 1938. It's taken us 6 weeks, what took him and his 2 colleagues 3, but our objectives were very different. He was cutting his way to the center of the mound where he expected to find a burial chamber. We, on the other hand, were investigating the structure of the mound itself. The British Museum expedition in the late 60s had already shown how difficult it can be to distinguish between the structure of an original mound and the various spoil heaps left by later visitations, such as robber pits, excavations, and so on. Now, in this mound, we knew we were dealing with one that had already been robbed and had already been excavated partially by Basil Brown. We were, of course, ready to disbelieve what Basil Brown had found, particularly a straight-sided, flat-bottomed boat. But over the last 6 weeks, our admiration for this man has grown. He was able to distinguish layer from layer on this site, perhaps as nobody since has been able. So, we finished this year at about the point that Basil Brown started his investigations in 1938, in the same place, in the bottom of the boat that he found. We have now learnt to distinguish between major collapses inside a barrow, where distinction is between very slight colors, very slight families of colors, very slight textures, and so on. But it's not good enough. What we need to be able to do is to see every episode that has occurred in the build-up of a barrow in ancient times. We need to understand every episode that has occurred since, everything that happened to that mound and what it was used for, because that way lies interpretation of the society that we're trying to study. Well, what do we need? We need to see a long expanse of the inside of a barrow in section. We need to use that to experiment, to be able to read more clearly these episodes. And so that's what we'll be doing next year.
And our next appointment with Professor Carver at Sutton, who is tomorrow afternoon at the same time, 3 o'clock.